When Camilla's son refused to bow to Queen Kate, the royal guard dragged him away. The morning of the coronation began with a soft golden light spreading across the palace grounds, touching the towers and windows with a warm glow. The city outside was buzzing with excitement. People lined the streets with small flags, waiting to catch even a distant glimpse of the ceremony. Inside the palace, the air felt different, still, expectant, and filled with a sense of history. Every corner seemed polished, every mirror shining, as if the palace itself understood the importance of the day. Camilla stood near one of the tall windows, looking out at the crowd gathering beyond the gates. She wore a gentle smile, but deep inside her heart felt heavier than her ceremonial gown. Today was supposed to be a grand celebration, a day that marked a new chapter for the royal family. Queen Kate's coronation promised hope and unity, at least in the public eye. But Camilla carried a private worry that kept returning to her mind. Her son, Elliot had always been bright and thoughtful, but he carried emotions more intensely than others. He had strong opinions, strong feelings, and a strong sense of what he believed was right. In many ways, these were qualities to be admired, yet they often made royal life difficult for him. Elliot had never been comfortable with palace expectations, and the idea of bowing to someone his age, especially someone with whom he had shared complicated history, only added pressure. Camilla had spoken to him the night before. She remembered walking quietly into his room, where he sat near the fireplace reading a book he wasn't really paying attention to. His shoulders were tense and his eyes were troubled. "Elliot," she had said softly, "tomorrow is important for all of us." "I know," he replied without looking up. "You understand what is expected during the ceremony?" He nodded, but it was not the kind of nod that offered comfort. It was the kind that said he understood the rules but did not agree with them. Now, standing by the window, Camilla replayed that moment. She had hoped he would come to terms with the tradition, even if only out of respect for the family and the ceremony. But a mother's instinct rarely misses the truth, and she sensed that his heart was still unsettled. Behind her, the palace staff moved efficiently. Footmen carried polished trays, event planners checked final details, and guards stood tall at every doorway. Soft music played somewhere in the background, gentle enough not to disturb the formal atmosphere. The palace had transformed into a stage, prepared for a performance the entire world would watch. Camilla turned from the window as her lady-in-waiting stepped forward. "Your carriage will arrive in 10 minutes, ma'am," she said gracefully. "Thank you," Camilla replied, smoothing the front of her gown. She glanced down the hallway where the rest of the family would soon gather. Though she kept her expression calm, inside she felt a gentle ache. She wished she could comfort Elliot once more, but the time for conversations had passed. Meanwhile, in his own chambers, Elliot was adjusting the cuffs of his ceremonial suit. The fabric was elegant, tailored perfectly, but his movements were stiff. He felt trapped between duty and honesty. Tradition told him he must bow. His heart told him he could not. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, noticing how unsure he looked despite the confident clothing. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. He was not trying to create drama or disrespect anyone. He simply wanted to stand by what he believed, though he wasn't even certain how to express those beliefs without causing trouble. He loved his mother deeply, respected her role, and admired her strength. The last thing he wanted was to shadow her day with disappointment. But he also could not lie with his actions. Bowing felt like pretending, and the internal conflict grew heavier the closer the ceremony came. A soft knock on the door echoed through the room before one of the attendants entered. "Master Elliot, the family is gathering. It's time." Elliot nodded, offering a polite smile even though anxiety tightened his chest. He followed the attendant through quiet hallways decorated with flowers, banners, and royal symbols. The palace seemed brighter than usual, almost glowing with celebration. When he reached the gathering area, Camilla turned toward him. Her eyes softened, and though she did not say a word, her expression asked a silent question. "Are you all right?" Elliot gave her a small nod. It wasn't a promise, but it was the best reassurance he could offer. Soon the family began their walk toward the grand entrance. The doors opened to reveal the golden carriage waiting outside, its polished surface reflecting sunlight in glittering waves. Crowds cheered as soon as they caught sight of the royal family stepping forward. Flags waved, children jumped with excitement, and cameras clicked rapidly. Camilla gracefully entered the carriage, and Elliot followed, sitting beside her. As the horses began to pull them forward, the sound of cheering filled the air. Camilla looked at her son from the corner of her eye. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "Just be thoughtful, that is all I ask." Elliot swallowed slowly, nodding again. His mother's voice always carried a gentle strength, and he wished he could give her peace in return. The ride to the ceremonial hall was slow but elegant. The streets were decorated with flowers and banners, and people from all backgrounds had gathered to witness the coronation. The carriage moved through an archway of roses before arriving at the palace entrance, where guards in bright uniforms stood in straight lines. Inside the coronation hall, the atmosphere felt almost magical. Tall columns reached toward the ceiling, chandeliers sparkled, and the floor gleamed as if it had been polished for days. Rows of distinguished guests filled the seats, officials, nobles, international visitors, all waiting for the moment Queen Kate would make her entrance. Camilla entered the hall with poise, carrying herself with the quiet dignity she had perfected over the years. Elliot walked beside her, his eyes scanning the room. Every detail seemed designed to highlight the importance of the day. Soft music played from the orchestra, and a hush fell over the audience as the final preparations began. When Queen Kate appeared at the far end of the hall, the crowd rose to their feet. She walked forward with grace, her gown shimmering under the lights. Her expression was peaceful, confident, and composed. It was her day, her moment, and she carried it well. Camilla watched her with a mixture of respect and cautious hope. She truly wanted the day to go smoothly for everyone. But every step Kate took brought them closer to the moment Camilla feared. The traditional greeting, when each member of the royal family would bow or curtsy to the new queen, approached quickly. Camilla could feel her heart beating a little faster. She clasped her hands gently in front of her, steadying herself. Elliot's thoughts raced. Each step Kate took toward him made his decision feel heavier. He felt the eyes of the audience, the weight of expectations, and the pressure of tradition pressing on him from all sides. He tried to breathe calmly, but his chest felt tight. When Queen Kate finally reached them, her gaze met Elliot's for a brief second. Her expression remained warm and welcoming, without judgment or assumption. She gave a soft nod, acknowledging him as she had done with all the others. Camilla stepped forward first, offering a graceful curtsy. It was smooth, practiced, and respectful. Then came Elliot's turn. He felt the entire hall fall into complete stillness. Even the soft music seemed to fade into the background. Every guest watched with quiet curiosity, unaware of the emotional struggle building inside him. He knew what tradition required. He knew what the world expected, and he knew what his heart resisted. Kate waited patiently, maintaining her calm presence. Camilla felt her breath catch. Her fingers curled slightly in the folds of her gown. She hoped, prayed, that Elliot would choose peace over pride, cooperation over conflict. But she also knew that he was not someone who could easily bend himself for the sake of appearances. Elliot stood tall, his expression composed yet distant. His hands remained at his sides. His knees did not bend. The bow did not come. Gasps fluttered through the room like a quiet breeze. Some guests whispered, others stiffened in their seats. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it felt impossibly long. Camilla's heart sank. She kept her face calm, but a deep worry settled inside her. Queen Kate, to her credit, remained composed. She gave a small, neutral smile, as though she refused to let the moment disturb the ceremony. But the silence that followed was unmistakable. Something had shifted, something delicate, something important. And the whole hall felt it. The moment Elliot chose not to bow stayed suspended in the air like a quiet echo no one could ignore. Though the coronation hall remained calm on the surface, the atmosphere beneath it felt tight, almost delicate. The orchestra continued playing softly, but even the music seemed unsure of itself for a brief second, as if it too had felt the shift. Queen Kate kept her expression gentle, not allowing any reaction to show. She had faced public pressure many times before, and she understood better than most the importance of grace under scrutiny. Instead of pausing or letting the room fall into discomfort, she simply turned her attention to the next person in line with smooth confidence. But the audience had already noticed. A wave of quiet murmurs traveled through the rows. Some guests leaned toward one another, whispering behind gloved hands. Others stared at Elliot with wide eyes, surprised that someone from the royal family would break such a long-standing tradition. It was not hostility, only shock, confusion, and curiosity. Camilla felt a soft ache in her chest as she watched the whispers grow. She wished she could place a reassuring hand on her son, but that was not possible in such a formal moment. She understood him better than anyone. She knew his heart was not rebellious but conflicted. Even so, the consequences of his choice were now unfolding in front of everyone. Elliot stood completely still, his expression calm but his heart beating hard beneath his suit. He had expected attention, but he hadn't expected it to feel so heavy. Every pair of eyes seemed to rest on him, even though Queen Kate had already moved forward to continue the ceremony. The hall was filled with admiration, celebration, pride, and now, a hint of tension. He took a slow breath, reminding himself that he had not acted out of disrespect. He simply wanted to remain honest. Yet honesty sometimes felt uncomfortable, especially when the world was watching. As Queen Kate reached the front of the hall, she gave a small nod to the Archbishop. Her movements were as graceful as ever, as though nothing had disrupted the flow of the event. The coronation continued, and the hall responded by settling back into its carefully planned order. The choir began singing, their voices rising gently toward the shining ceiling. Still, not everyone managed to forget what had happened. Inside the royal balcony, several advisors exchanged thoughtful looks. They knew that even a small gesture could become a discussion point for the public. One advisor leaned closer to another, speaking in a whisper so soft it barely carried through the air. "This will need addressing," she said, not unkindly but with the calm practicality of someone who handled delicate matters for a living. Camilla kept her eyes forward, meeting the ceremony with a serene expression. She had learned long ago how to remain composed no matter what unfolded around her. Yet beneath that calm exterior was the worry only a mother could feel. She wondered whether she should have spoken more firmly to Elliot the night before, or whether her encouragement to be true to himself had made things harder for him. Elliot, meanwhile, tried to quiet the thoughts running through his mind. The choir's harmonious voices swept through the hall, creating a soothing blanket of sound. But even the music couldn't erase the feeling that he had stepped onto a path that would lead to difficult conversations later. He watched Queen Kate place her hand on the ceremonial cushion as part of the formal sequence. The audience admired her poise. She seemed untouched by tension, yet Elliot wondered if she had noticed his refusal more deeply than she allowed herself to show. He hoped she understood his intentions were not harsh or personal. They were simply honest to his feelings. As the ceremony progressed, the atmosphere slowly regained its natural rhythm. The guests began focusing on the beauty of the coronation again. The glowing chandeliers, the choir's gentle rise and fall, the soft rustle of gowns and velvet robes. Even the air smelled faintly of fresh flowers arranged throughout the hall. But in the quiet corners of the room, subtle glances still drifted toward Elliot from time to time. Some guests were thoughtful, others curious. A few looked concerned, more for what it meant for the royal family than anything else. Elliot noticed the attention but kept his posture steady. When Queen Kate received the golden sash, a symbolic gesture marking her new role, the audience applauded softly. The sound rolled through the hall like a gentle wave. Camilla clapped with the same warm sincerity she always offered during important milestones. Despite her worry, she felt proud of Kate. The young queen had handled the unexpected moment with admirable calm. At one point, Kate's gaze brushed lightly toward the royal family again. Her expression did not change, but her eyes carried a small flicker of understanding, a sign that she was aware of everything that had happened but had chosen to acknowledge it with grace rather than reaction. The ceremony lasted longer than Elliot expected. The gentle rise and fall of voices, the careful placement of royal symbols, and the flow of tradition seemed endless in his mind. It wasn't that he disliked the event. He simply felt the weight of the earlier moment pressing gently against his thoughts. Camilla tried to focus on the ceremony while also keeping track of Elliot through small sideways glances. She noted how composed he remained, though she knew him well enough to recognize when he was deep in thought. Her heart softened with a mix of pride and concern. Once the closing blessing was completed, the hall erupted into warm applause. The ceremony had officially concluded. Guests rose from their seats, smiling, adjusting their garments, and preparing for the next part of the celebration. For most of them, the earlier tension had blended into the background. But for the royal family, especially Elliot, The moment still hovered like a quiet question waiting to be answered. As the applause faded, attendants guided the royal family to the exit where the formal procession would continue. Camilla walked with poised steps, yet her mind lingered on what might happen once they were no longer on public display. Elliot followed just behind her. Although he kept his expression neutral, his thoughts circled the same point over and over. He wondered how his mother truly felt. He wondered how Queen Kate would interpret his action. Most of all, he wondered if he should have chosen differently. He did not regret his decision, but he could not deny the complications it would bring. The royal hallway outside the coronation chamber was lined with portraits, flowers, and guards standing at respectful attention. As the family entered the hallway, a new level of quiet settled over them. Without the eyes of thousands watching, the atmosphere felt more personal and more delicate. One of the senior advisors stepped forward politely. "Your Majesty, the reception preparations are ready," she informed Queen Kate. Then, with a brief glance toward Camilla and Elliot, she added softly, "There will be a private moment arranged shortly for the family should it be needed." Kate acknowledged her with a calm nod. She did not rush, did not push, did not make any expression that would hint at discontent. She simply continued walking forward with the elegance expected of a queen. Camilla hesitated for a brief moment before following. She wanted to speak to Elliot privately, but the hallway was still too populated. It was Elliot who finally whispered first, leaning slightly closer to her. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." His voice was quiet, almost fragile, as if he already knew the answer but needed reassurance anyway. Camilla looked at him gently. "I know you didn't, but sometimes decisions have effects we cannot fully predict." Her tone was caring, not scolding. Elliot nodded slowly, unsure what to say next. Behind them, several of the guests were already discussing the coronation in cheerful tones. The sound of light conversation filled the air, creating a contrast to the quiet tension following Elliot's steps. As they approached the reception room, where a more relaxed atmosphere awaited, a subtle shift occurred. Members of the royal guard exchanged glances, not unkind, not harsh, simply attentive. Their role required awareness, and they had noticed the unusual moment earlier. Elliot felt their eyes upon him, though they maintained strict professionalism. Queen Kate entered the reception area first, greeted by applause and smiles. She accepted the warm attention gracefully, exchanging polite words with international guests. She behaved as though nothing unusual had occurred during the ceremony, allowing the celebration to continue without interruption. Camilla joined a small group of guests for conversation, though her thoughts wandered back to Elliot repeatedly. She answered every polite question with ease, but part of her stayed alert, hoping her son remained calm and comfortable. Elliot found himself near a tall window overlooking the palace gardens. The view outside was peaceful, flowers blooming, trees swaying in a soft breeze, and sunlight dancing on the pathways. The sight eased some of the tension in his chest. He watched the garden quietly, letting his thoughts settle. He did not notice at first that several members of the guard had shifted positions, not in a threatening way, but in a manner suggesting careful observation. The palace had protocols for everything, including unexpected actions during public ceremonies. Even harmless actions, like Elliot's, required attention, simply because they broke tradition. Elliot remained unaware that his peaceful moment near the window marked the beginning of what would soon become a more delicate situation. And while the reception continued in bright spirits, the quiet ripple created by Elliot's decision had only begun to spread through the palace walls. The reception hall glowed with warm light, and soft music floated gently from the far corner where a quartet played quiet melodies. Guests moved around the room with relaxed smiles, their earlier tension forgotten as they admired the beauty of the coronation celebration. The atmosphere felt lighter now, filled with polite laughter, clinking glasses, and the smooth hum of friendly conversations. But in the middle of this brightness stood Elliot, still near the tall window, his thoughts drifting like clouds over the palace gardens outside. He watched a pair of birds hop along the edge of a stone fountain, completely unaware of the world's expectations and rules. Their simple freedom made him wonder why the human world had to carry so much weight. He pressed his fingertips lightly against the cool glass, feeling the faint morning warmth beyond it. For a moment, he truly believed he might blend into the quiet scenery and escape the whispers he knew would eventually surround him. But the palace did not forget. Everything inside it moved according to tradition, structure, and close observation. The slight shift in the energy caused by Elliot's refusal had not vanished. It had simply softened and settled beneath the surface. The royal guard, trained to notice the smallest changes, had already moved into a more attentive posture. They were not upset. They were not reacting to danger. They were simply following protocol designed to keep peace within the palace during important events. Elliot sensed the gentle shift before he saw it. The faint, rhythmic footsteps of guards echoed in the hallway leading toward the reception room. It wasn't loud, nor was it hurried. It was simply purposeful. He turned his head slightly, not fully looking back, but aware enough to understand that attention was moving toward him. He straightened his posture softly, not out of fear, but out of habit. Growing up in the palace had trained him to recognize when something formal was about to happen. A few guests noticed the movement as well. Their conversations quieted for a brief moment before returning to normal. Camilla, who had been engaged in polite conversation with a small group near the entrance, noticed the guards' discreet alignment. Her heart gave a soft, almost unnoticeable stir. She mouthed a silent breath and excused herself gently from the conversation. Queen Kate, still surrounded by guests who wished to congratulate her, kept her calm expression. She did not intervene. She simply let the palace procedures unfold naturally, trusting that everything would be handled with care. As the guards approached, their expressions remained neutral and respectful. Their uniforms were impeccably pressed, their footsteps measured, their tone calm. Nothing about them suggested harshness. They moved like people performing a delicate task, aware that the situation required sensitivity rather than authority. Elliot turned fully toward them now. He offered a small, polite nod, though confusion flickered softly in his eyes. One of the senior guards stepped forward. His voice was low, steady, and gentle. "Master Elliot," he began, "may we speak with you for a moment?" The guests nearby continued their conversations, pretending not to notice, though many kept listening quietly. Elliot tried to keep his voice steady. "Is something wrong?" "No, sir," the guard replied kindly. "We simply need to escort you to a more private area. There are matters the palace wishes to discuss with you." Elliot felt a small cloud of concern drift into his thoughts. He understood what they meant. It wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was simply the palace responding to something unexpected. Still, the idea of being escorted drew fresh attention to him, something he had hoped would fade after the ceremony. Camilla moved closer as soon as she sensed the conversation. Her steps were calm, but her worry deepened with each one. She approached the group quietly, her presence bringing a soft warmth. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her tone gentle but steady. The senior guard bowed his head slightly out of respect. "Yes, ma'am. We are simply following standard protocol. We must request Master Elliot's presence in a private chamber for a brief conversation." Camilla looked at her son with thoughtful eyes. She could see he wasn't frightened, but she also sensed he felt a bit overwhelmed. She wished she could lighten the moment for him, but the palace procedure wasn't something she could dismiss with a simple request. Elliot nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, though his voice held quiet uncertainty. The guard gestured with an open hand, offering Elliot the choice to walk first. Everything about their movements was courteous. They kept a comfortable distance, giving him room, showing they meant no discomfort or pressure. Guests around the room turned subtly, pretending to observe the decorations or the refreshments, yet their attention remained gently fixed on the scene. There was no judgment in their eyes, only curiosity mixed with concern. Elliot walked forward calmly, following the path toward the hallway. The guards walked beside him, but not too close. Their presence felt more like guidance than force. Camilla wanted to walk with him, but she knew doing so publicly might draw even more attention. Instead, she followed quietly behind them, keeping enough distance to show respect for the procedure while still remaining emotionally close to her son. As they entered the hallway, the sounds of the reception softened behind them. The corridor felt cooler, quieter, and more private. The tall windows lining the wall cast soft patterns of sunlight on the floor. The guards walked with steady rhythm, guiding Elliot toward one of the palace's private conversation rooms, a place often used for sensitive discussions. Elliot felt the silence around him deepen. He didn't feel threatened, but he felt observed, and that created a delicate knot in his chest. He glanced once toward Camilla. Her comforting presence soothed him. When they reached the small chamber, the senior guard opened the door gently. The room inside was simple and elegant, decorated with pale blue walls, a few paintings, and a soft couch facing a wooden table. The sunlight drifting through the window made the room feel warm and peaceful. Elliot stepped inside. Camilla entered behind him. The guards remained at the door, not intruding, simply standing in the hallway with quiet discipline. "Please take your time," the senior guard said softly. "A member of the palace advisory team will join you shortly." They bowed respectfully and closed the door. Elliot sat down on the couch slowly. The soft cushion gave beneath him, grounding him. Camilla sat beside him, placing her hand gently on his. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur that carried all the love only a mother could hold. "Yes," he whispered, though his eyes carried a hint of regret. "I didn't think it would turn into something like this." Camilla squeezed his hand gently. "You made a choice that was true to your heart. The palace simply wishes to understand it better. This is not a punishment." Elliot lowered his gaze, breathing slowly. "Do you think I embarrassed the family?" Camilla paused, choosing her words with care. "I think you surprised them, but embarrassment is a feeling that passes. What matters is that your intentions were not unkind. And anyone who truly understands you will know that." Elliot nodded, though he still felt the weight of the moment. A soft knock came at the door. One of the advisors entered, a calm-faced woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile. She carried a notebook but held it loosely, showing she was here for conversation, not judgment. "Good afternoon," she greeted softly. "I hope you're both comfortable. May I sit?" Camilla nodded politely, and the advisor took a seat across from them. "I want to reassure you," she began, directing her words to Elliot, "that you are not in trouble. We are simply here to talk. The coronation is a moment watched by many people, and when something unexpected happens, the palace prefers to understand it rather than make assumptions." Elliot exhaled slowly. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone." The advisor smiled kindly. "We know." And Queen Kate understood that as well. "She did not request any action against you. This is simply a conversation, so we can understand what you felt and help guide the situation with care." Her gentle tone eased the tension in the room. Elliot explained quietly, choosing his words with honesty and calm. He spoke about how he respected Kate but felt unsure about certain traditions. He admitted he struggled with the idea of bowing because it felt symbolic in a way he couldn't accept, not out of rebellion but out of personal conflict. The advisor listened patiently, nodding thoughtfully. She took a few light notes, not pressing him, not rushing the moment. Camilla watched her with gratitude. The palace, despite all its structure, still had people who understood softness. When Elliot finished, the advisor closed her notebook gently. "Thank you for sharing that," she said. "It's important for us to hear your feelings. You spoke with honesty, and that is appreciated. I will share your explanation with Her Majesty discreetly. She values clarity and calmness, and I believe she will understand your perspective." Elliot felt a wave of relief spread across his heart. It didn't solve everything, but it eased the fear that he had created irreversible confusion. "You may return to the reception whenever you feel ready," the advisor added with a smile. "There is no rush." After she left, Camilla placed her arm around Elliot's shoulders softly. "You handled that well," she murmured. He closed his eyes briefly, letting her comfort settle inside him. Outside the door, the guards resumed their calm posture. Their work was not to intimidate, it was simply to handle protocol with dignity. They waited patiently, ready to escort Elliot back whenever he stepped out. They knew the moment was delicate and treated it with care. Inside the room, Elliot sat quietly with his mother, letting the weight of the situation dissolve little by little. The palace walls no longer felt heavy. They simply felt like part of a story still unfolding. And though Elliot didn't yet know what would happen next, he sensed that this moment, gentle as it was, would lead to an important conversation that might finally bring clarity between him and the new queen. The small, quiet room where Elliot and Camilla sat felt calmer now. The sunlight coming through the window created soft patterns on the polished floor, almost as if the palace itself were trying to offer comfort after the morning's tension. Elliot leaned back slightly against the couch, letting the silence settle around him. His thoughts, which had felt loud and uncertain earlier, now drifted more softly, like leaves carried on a gentle breeze. Camilla watched him with a mixture of affection and concern. She knew her son well enough to understand that he often needed time to process his feelings. Even though the conversation with the palace advisor had gone better than she feared, Elliot still carried the emotional weight of the moment. She could see it in the way his eyes lingered on the floor, the way his fingers tapped lightly against the fabric of the couch. "You should take a breath," Camilla said softly. "Today has asked a lot of you." Elliot gave a faint smile. "It asked a lot of you, too." Camilla reached out and smoothed a small crease in the sleeve of his jacket, a simple gesture that reminded him of when she used to fix his school uniform before important days. "I'm all right," she said. "My concern is you." He nodded gently. "I didn't expect so much attention." His voice stayed quiet, as if he feared that speaking too loudly would break the calmness of the moment. Camilla tilted her head slightly. "Attention always finds its way to the unexpected," she murmured. "But that does not mean you did something wrong." Elliot breathed slowly, absorbing her words. Even though he knew she meant them sincerely, he couldn't help replaying the scene in the coronation hall. The quiet gasps from the audience, the shifting glances from the rows of guests, it all returned to him in little waves. He didn't feel ashamed, but he did feel the uncomfortable pressure of being misunderstood. A soft knock came at the door again. This time a butler stepped in politely and bowed. "Her Majesty has requested a private moment with Lady Camilla," he said gently. "At your convenience." Camilla knew immediately what this meant. Kate was not summoning her out of frustration. She was inviting her for a quiet conversation, a place to discuss the day without crowd or ceremony. Camilla rose slowly, smoothing her skirt with calm hands. Elliot stood as well. "I should come with you," he said quietly. Camilla shook her head with a reassuring smile. "Not yet. She wants to speak with me first. Then she may ask to speak with you afterward, but only when she feels the moment is right." Elliot looked down, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Do you think she's upset?" Camilla placed a gentle hand against his cheek. "No, I think she simply wants understanding, and so do you." The butler stepped back respectfully as Camilla followed him toward a private chamber on the opposite side of the hallway. Elliot watched her leave, feeling both comforted and anxious. He trusted his mother completely, but he knew that once she walked through those doors, a new conversation would begin, one that would shape how the day's events were remembered within the palace. Once the door closed behind Camilla, Elliot sat again, alone with his thoughts. The room felt slightly different now, as though the air had shifted in her absence. He folded his hands together and stared quietly at the painting on the wall, a soft landscape of rolling hills and a sunrise. The sunlight in the painting reminded him of the morning before the coronation, when everything still felt peaceful and uncomplicated. After several minutes, the quieting effect of the room began to ease the tension in his mind. He remembered the advisor's gentle words, the calmness in her eyes, and the way she had listened to him as if his feelings mattered. The thought gave him a sense of comfort he hadn't expected. Meanwhile, Camilla walked down a quieter corridor, following the butler toward Queen Kate's private sitting room. The palace often felt enormous during grand ceremonies, but in moments like this, it felt small and intimate, like a home that held memories in every corner. The butler opened the door softly. "Her Majesty is waiting," he said, stepping aside. Camilla entered the room with careful steps. Kate stood near the window, her hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. Her gown had been changed for something simpler, yet elegant, a sign that the formal part of the day had ended and a more personal conversation was about to begin. When Kate turned to face Camilla, her expression was warm but thoughtful. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. Camilla offered a respectful smile. "Of course." Kate gestured toward the chairs near the small table, and both women sat down facing each other. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft ticking of a nearby clock and the distant hum of the palace activities outside. "I wanted to speak with you privately," Kate began, folding her hands loosely in her lap. "There was an unexpected moment during the ceremony. I imagine it must be weighing on you." Camilla nodded slowly. "It was surprising for all of us," she admitted. Elliot did not intend to cause difficulty. His feelings simply led him in a direction he could not hide. "I understand," Kate replied softly. Her voice carried no frustration, only sincerity. "I do not interpret his action as disrespect. But it did catch the attention of the hall, and naturally, the palace wishes to address it with clarity." Camilla felt a gentle wave of relief wash through her. She had been worried that Kate might feel personally hurt or disrespected. Hearing the calmness in the Queen's voice eased her heart. "Elliot is thoughtful," Camilla said. Perhaps too thoughtful at times, he struggles with symbols and traditions that feel heavy to him. I have tried to guide him, but I also do not want to force him into actions that conflict with his heart. Kate smiled softly. And that is why he is fortunate to have you as his mother. She paused before adding, "May I ask what he shared with the advisor?" Camilla explained Elliot's words with honesty and care. She described his uncertainty about the meaning of bowing, his desire to remain genuine, and his worry about disappointing the family. Kate listened attentively, her expression gentle and understanding. "I appreciate his honesty," she said after a moment, "and I appreciate yours. It means more to me than any gesture of ceremony." Camilla looked at her gratefully. "He does not wish to create distance between you." "I know," Kate replied. "And that is why I would like to speak with him privately. Not to question him, not to correct him, but to understand him. Today was a beginning, not only for me as queen, but for all of us as a family. I want that beginning to be built on truth, not pressure." Camilla felt her heart lift. He will be relieved to hear that. Kate placed a gentle hand on the arm of her chair. "Please tell him I wish to meet him when he feels ready, not as queen to subject, but as one family member to another." Camilla nodded, touched by the grace in Kate's words. She rose to leave, knowing the conversation had brought a peaceful shift to the day. As she returned to the small room where Elliot waited, she found him sitting quietly, his gaze lost in thought. When he heard the door open, he turned with a hopeful expression. "How did it go?" he asked. Camilla smiled warmly. "Well, very well. Kate is not upset. She understands more than you think." Elliot felt a breath he had been holding slowly release. "Really?" "Yes," she said. "And she wishes to speak with you when you feel ready. She wants understanding, not explanation. She wants connection, not formality." Elliot's shoulders softened. "I would like to speak with her," he said truthfully. "I didn't want her to think I didn't respect her." Camilla placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Then let's go." Together they walked through the quiet hallway once more. The guards maintained respectful distance, their expressions soft and professional. They stepped aside as Elliot approached the Queen's sitting room, allowing him to enter without hesitation. Inside, Kate stood again near the window. The gentle afternoon light wrapped her in a warm glow. When Elliot entered, she turned to him with a welcoming smile. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Elliot bowed his head, not a formal bow, but a polite gesture born of genuine respect. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied. Kate motioned for him to sit, and he took a seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable, like the pause before a meaningful conversation. Finally, Kate began, "I know today was complicated for you." Elliot looked down slightly. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." "I know," she said kindly, "and I was not hurt. I was surprised, but not hurt." He looked up, meeting her eyes with relief. Kate continued gently, "Traditions can feel heavy. I understand that. They ask things of us that we do not always feel ready to give. But what matters most is the heart behind the action, not the action itself." Elliot nodded slowly. "I just wanted to stay honest. And honesty," Kate said, "is something I value very deeply." The tension between them softened like morning mist dissolving in sunlight. They spoke quietly for several minutes, about tradition, about expectations, about the challenges of growing within a world that constantly watched them. Kate listened to Elliot with genuine curiosity. Elliot listened to her with new understanding. By the end of the conversation, a gentle balance had been formed between them, something that felt like the early beginning of mutual trust. When Elliot finally left the room, he felt lighter than he had since the morning began. Camilla stood waiting for him in the hallway, and the peaceful expression on his face told her everything she needed to know. "You spoke well," she said softly. "I think we both did," Elliot replied, and a small but true smile appeared on his lips. The day that had started with tension now seemed to be moving toward understanding. And though everything was not yet resolved, the first steps toward harmony had been taken with calm hearts and gentle words. The hallway outside Queen Kate's sitting room felt unusually gentle as Elliot stepped out, as though the air itself carried a sense of calm. The sunlight coming through the tall windows had softened into a warm glow, hinting at the late afternoon settling over the palace. Footsteps echoed softly in the distance, but in this small corner of the palace, everything felt slow and peaceful. Camilla waited for him with patient eyes. The moment she saw the relaxed expression on his face, her heart eased. She gave him a small smile, the kind a mother gives when she sees her child making progress through something difficult. "It went well?" she asked softly. Elliot nodded. "Better than I expected." She touched his arm lightly. "Good, that's all we hoped for today." As they began walking back toward the reception room, Elliot felt an unfamiliar lightness inside. His steps were easier, his breath deeper. The burden he had carried all morning had finally begun to dissolve. His conversation with Kate had been honest, calm, and surprisingly warm. For the first time since the coronation began, he felt understood. But their day was not yet over. A message from Kate had been sent quietly through one of the attendants. She wished to meet with both Elliot and Camilla together in a private drawing room away from the crowd. It was not a demand, nor a formal order. It was framed simply as a gentle invitation, one meant to build connection, not hierarchy. Camilla and Elliot followed the quiet corridor until they reached the door of the drawing room. A guard opened it softly for them, bowing as they entered. Inside, the atmosphere felt even more peaceful. The room was decorated with soft colors, light cream walls, a pale blue rug, and delicate paintings of gardens and rivers. A teapot rested on a small table beside a vase of fresh flowers. Queen Kate stood near the fireplace, no longer dressed in her ceremonial gown. She wore a simple but elegant dress now, one that made her seem far more approachable than the public figure she had been earlier that day. When she turned to greet them, her entire expression carried warmth. "Thank you both for joining me," she said, her voice as gentle as the room around them. Camilla curtsied softly and smiled. Elliot bowed his head respectfully, not with formality, but with genuine appreciation. Kate motioned toward the comfortable seating area near the window. The afternoon sun poured in gently, making the space glow with a soft golden hue. They all sat down, forming a loose circle that felt more like a casual family discussion than a royal meeting. For a moment no one spoke, not out of discomfort, but because the quietness felt natural. The silence allowed them to settle into the space, breathe deeply, and let their thoughts gather peacefully. Finally, Kate spoke with a calm smile. "Today has been important in many ways. Not only for the nation, but also for us. What happened earlier was unexpected, but it does not have to define the day." Elliot listened carefully, grateful for her openness. "I appreciate the honesty you showed," Kate continued. "And I appreciate how you handled our conversation earlier. It meant a great deal to me." Elliot felt warmth rise in his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I wasn't trying to create trouble, I just felt unsure." "And that is something I understand," Kate replied. "Traditions carry weight. Sometimes they feel heavy, sometimes they feel unnecessary, and sometimes they feel meaningful, but only when they come from the heart." Camilla looked at Kate with deep gratitude. This was the conversation she had hoped for, a chance for understanding, without judgment or pressure. "I want us to move forward with openness," Kate said gently. "I don't want you to feel forced into symbols that confuse you. I would rather you feel comfortable enough to speak honestly as you did today." Elliot nodded slowly. "I didn't want to disappoint you." "You didn't," Kate assured him. "Surprise is not the same as disappointment. What matters most is trust, and trust begins with truth." A soft calm settled over Elliot's shoulders. He had feared that his choice would create a permanent gap between them, but now he realized it had opened a door instead, a door to clearer understanding. Camilla leaned forward slightly, her voice warm. "We're all learning how to move through these new roles together. Today taught us something important about one another." Kate smiled at her. "It did, and it reminded me that leadership is not only about being honored, it's also about listening." They spoke for a while about lighter things: the ceremony, the guests, the overwhelming number of flowers delivered to the palace. Kate laughed gently at the memory of one group of guests who had mistakenly arrived at the wrong entrance and ended up being escorted through the palace kitchen, where they received a friendly greeting from the staff and a plate of warm pastries. Elliot smiled at the story, feeling more comfortable with each passing minute. The room no longer felt like a place of discussion, it felt like a place of mutual trust. After the lighter moments passed, Kate grew thoughtful again. "I know the world outside these walls watches every step we take," she said. "But inside, we are still people. We still feel, we still question, we still grow." Elliot nodded. "I guess sometimes I forget that it's all right to question things." "It is more than all right," Kate said kindly. "Questioning helps us understand who we are." Camilla listened with quiet pride. Her son was speaking with openness now, and Kate was responding with the grace of someone who understood the importance of patience. The conversation gradually deepened into more personal territory. Kate asked Elliot about his interests, his hopes for the future, and his challenges living under public attention. Elliot answered honestly, sometimes hesitating, sometimes expressing himself with newfound clarity. He admitted he sometimes felt unsure about his place in the family and the expectations placed on him. He confessed that traditions confused him, not because he disliked them, but because he feared losing his individuality within them. Kate listened with warmth, not interrupting, letting him finish every thought. When he spoke about wanting to contribute to the family without feeling pressured, Kate nodded appreciatively. "Your contribution begins with being yourself," she said softly. "Authenticity carries its own kind of strength." Camilla felt her eyes soften. This conversation was giving Elliot something she had always hoped he would find, a place where he could be himself without fear. As the afternoon drifted into early evening, the golden light in the room slowly shifted into a softer, cooler shade. A gentle breeze from the window rustled the curtains, brushing the air with a peaceful rhythm. Kate poured tea for all three of them, her movements relaxed and friendly. They sipped quietly, enjoying the warm taste and the comfortable silence between their conversations. For a moment, it felt as if they were simply three people sharing a peaceful moment, not members of a family shaped by tradition and responsibility. After a while, Kate set her cup down and took a gentle breath. "I would like us to agree on something," she said softly, looking at both Camilla and Elliot. "Let today be a beginning of understanding one another more deeply, a beginning of moving forward with kindness and honesty." Elliot nodded. "I would like that." Camilla smiled warmly. "As would I, and let us remember," Kate continued, "that mistakes, surprises, and uncertainties are all part of being human. If we face them with openness, they become opportunities rather than obstacles." The words settled into the room like a soft blanket, comforting and calm. Elliot felt the truth of them resonate inside him. He wasn't perfect, but he didn't have to be. He only needed to be honest and willing to learn. Kate then reached out her hand gently, offering it toward Elliot. It was not a formal gesture. It was not symbolic or ceremonial. It was simply human. Elliot looked at the hand for a quiet moment before placing his own in hers. Their handshake was warm, steady, and filled with mutual respect. Camilla watched with her heart full, seeing the first real step toward harmony. After the handshake, Kate smiled gently. "Thank you," she said, "for your courage to be honest today." Elliot smiled back, feeling something inside him settle peacefully. "Thank you," he replied, "for listening." The meeting ended not with grand gestures or formal announcements, but with soft words and peaceful hearts. They all rose, moving slowly toward the door. Kate opened it calmly, letting the warmth of the palace corridor flow into the room. As they stepped out, the sounds of distant conversations and soft music drifted through the air once more. The coronation celebration continued in another wing of the palace, filled with light and cheerful voices. But for Elliot, Camilla, and Kate, the real celebration had already happened here, in this quiet room, in the softness of understanding, in the beginnings of trust. As Camilla and Elliot walked back together, she slipped her arm gently through his. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Elliot looked at her with a peaceful smile. "I'm proud of us." And as the day slowly shifted into evening, the palace felt not only grander but kinder. The earlier tension had faded like morning mist under the sun, replaced by a sense of connection that promised better days ahead. The story did not end with perfection, but it ended with hope. Hope built on honesty, understanding, and gentle hearts willing to meet halfway.